Hi, everyone. We miss you today. Here's how it's going to work. Please do not start this lecture until you have completed the Unit 1 survey. The Unit 1 survey is under my modules for Thursday, Friday. And because Ms. Glickman and I are both out today, I'm out honoring the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, and Ms. Glickman is out on a well-deserved break. You are going to watch this recording of us teaching Intro to Totalitarianism and Intro to Stalin, and you will pause the recording from time to time to take sketch notes or to answer questions. We will be checking all of the sketch notes on Monday. You do not need to turn them in. Everything will be in your notebook, and I will check them on Monday. Enjoy the lecture. I think you will all like it a lot. I'm going to go into present mode now. So this may take a moment just for things to get loaded. Alrighty. So today's do now is a little different. We want you to just, in your notebooks, write the first idea that comes to your head when you hear the word totalitarianism. You want to think back to what we did in yesterday's class about the definition of totalitarianism. And then I want you to predict how might a totalitarian leader control his or her society. So now would be a good time to pause the video and to answer questions 1 and 2. Okay, thanks for answering those questions. Here's what to expect in today's lecture. We're going to give you an intro to this unit. This is Unit 2. This includes vocab and key ideas. It is super important that you get this down in order to understand the rest of the unit. Ms. Glickman is going to do a quick communism, capitalism review. Some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not. That's important for understanding Stalin and Russia. And then I'm going to give you some background on Russia and some intro notes on Stalin. And again, there will be places to pause, stretch, sketch note, answer questions, okay? The reason we are having you do that is because we want you to make sense of what you have just learned. Again, Ms. Glickman has made awesome sketch notes. Use those as an example if you're stuck. And remember, I am checking those on Monday. So I have in here to review comments for Tiananmen Square if we finish. So you will know if we have finished that. If not, just ignore. And you have no homework so long as you finish the survey and this lecture. You deserve a restful and wonderful weekend. Thank you all for working super hard. All right. So now I would like you to turn to the vocab section of your notebook. I've already messed up. Vocab section of your notebook. All right, make sure you are there. Here we go. First vocab word. And again, we spoke about this a little bit on Tuesday and Wednesday's class, but I want you to get this down. The title of our unit is Totalitarianism, so it is important we get a really good definition. Totalitarianism is a type of government that takes total, see the name, total, totalitarianism, centralized control over every part of society. That means what you do in private, they can regulate, and what you do in public, they definitely regulate. When I say regulate, I mean completely control. Totalitarianism is typically one leader in power that uses several different types of control tactics or methods of control to manipulate, persuade, and completely oppress their people. And of course, it requires complete subservience by the people. And subservience means obedience without question. They do exactly what the leader asks. My guess is by this point, you have already talked about some of these ideas in English. Next vocab word, indoctrination. This is my favorite one. This is instruction of the government's beliefs to mold people's minds. Where do you think indoctrination typically happens? Yes, you are right, in the schools. This happens in the schools, predominantly. This is where the teachers are told are instructed to teach their students a particular type of ideologies or particular type of beliefs, so they will grow up to also follow the rules of the government. And to, what's another way I can put it? Ms. Glickman, step in here. Oh, we already had something fall. It's a way for the students to grow up and to learn to be completely obedient and to love the leader. And when you are taught something, you are told to accept it as the truth and not to question it. Propaganda. Propaganda you all are probably fairly familiar with. Propaganda takes many forms. It can be an idea, it can be a poster, it can be a song, it can be a movie that are often false or misleading and manipulate people's beliefs towards their government. What is their purpose? To widely spread ideas about their cause or their leader. And again, propaganda would fall maybe under the headline of disinformation. It's purposely meant to convince you of something or to persuade you to do something, and it can be false or misleading. All right, so we are back in the main section of our notebooks. Main section. I would like you to label it Unit 2, Totalitarian Leaders. Here are our essential questions for the unit. These are questions we're going to be looking at through the entire unit, and you will have the option to choose one of these questions to answer in the paper that you will be working on in my class and in Ms. Press's class. What we are going to be working on today is how do totalitarian leaders gain and maintain control of their population? So underneath totalitarian leaders, I would like you to write the essential question. You can pause the video now so you can see it. Here are the key ideas for the lecture. So we're going to have you sketch note this out in just a minute, but keeping in mind that the three things we're looking at today, methods of control, communism versus capitalism, Russia, basic facts, and intro to Joseph Stalin. Okay. Today's objective is I will be able to list the 8 methods of control and explain how they are employed or used in totalitarian society. So 8 methods of control. So we are now in our first section of our sketch notes. If you do not remember what the 3 sections are, please feel free to rewind so you have them. Section 1 is the methods of control. Here are the 8 different ways that leaders can control their country. Now, again, this list is not exhaustive. There are more, but these are the ones we're going to focus on. Number 1, propaganda and censorship. Number 2, terror. 3, indoctrination. And again, if you forget what these words mean, just go back to your vocab section. Number 4, religious persecution. 5, finding a common enemy. 6, revised history. 7, rituals and ceremonies. And 8, manipulation of language. For today's class, we are going to look at methods of control 1 through 5. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Glickman for her to explain her sketch notes. Here's what I would like you to sketch note for this part. The vocab, the essential question, the 3 sections of class today, and the 8 methods of control. I have 2 tips for you. Number 1, I want you to think about which structure, I already made a mistake, which structure you want to use for the 3 big areas of class, right? The methods of control, communism versus capitalism, and Russia. Tip number 2, think of an icon that can go with each vocab word. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Glickman, and she's going to explain how she made her sketch notes.
Hello everyone, I miss you. I hope you are doing well. So here is an example of the sketch notes that I did for today's class. So I really wanted to find a way to make it clearly organized. So I just did simple boxes, and I did 2 pages. So I'll show you the next one on the next slide. But here I focused on the vocab. So you can see I put each of the 3 terms. And one of the words that really stuck out to me was control, right? And we know today we're focusing on the idea of control tactics. So I made sure when I was doing my notes that I made the word control really big and bold so it would pop off the page, and I would remember that as one of the main ideas. I also used a lot of icons, and I'm going to bring it back to this emoji idea, right? Every time you're writing down a word in a definition or you're taking notes, try to think of how you would put this into an emoji and then try to draw that out if you can. So one of the ones I really liked that I did for totalitarianism was I drew this leader on the left with his arms sort of out commanding things of his people, and then you see this big row of people that he's talking to. And then at the bottom, I put my essential question with a giant question mark. Again, I think that's a pretty explanatory icon that I could use. And let me go to the next slide. One moment, everyone. Okay, hold on. Technical difficulties. All right, so here is the second page of notes that I did, and this is where I took the 3 sections of the lesson and I gave them each their own boxes. So you can see at the top, I wanted to make individual boxes for each of the 8 methods of control that we're going to be talking about. I made sort of like a T-chart to get ready for the notes where we're going to be comparing capitalism and communism. And then I left a big open space at the bottom where I could put the basic facts about Russia and the intro to Joseph Stalin. So I would recommend maybe pausing the video right now and taking a second to go back and look at the 3 sections that we're going to be covering and take some time to find a way to organize this very clearly. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Diaz.
Okay. Can't wait to see those sketch notes. Let's move on, and we are going to be in the first box here of methods of control, and I'm going to break some of those down for us. Oops. The first one we are going to look at is how was propaganda and censorship used? So if we look here to the right, we see a picture of, let me just move because I can't see my own notes. Okay, this is a North Korean propaganda poster showing its eternal president, Kim Il-sung. As you can see, he is being adored and revered by his country. You see his face up in like the sun, and the soldiers and the people are looking up to him as he is the best. And this is one of the posters that has been seen in North Korea. So propaganda is used to sway or convince people to support a cause or set of beliefs. And in this case, the cause that they are supporting is this man, the eternal president of North Korea. He was the first president of North Korea. They also, with totalitarian leaders, control all mass media. And if you control all mass media, think about how that might work in your favor. If you thought that that was a way that you can spread only positive images about yourself, then you are correct. We're going to pause for a minute, and I want to make a connection to our first unit. One of the reasons we spent so long learning how to evaluate sources is because it is incredibly important as people that live in this country to be able to evaluate what is the truth and what is reliable. So we do not fall into a society where we believe everything that we read. Okay, next. Another way that propaganda is used is that there is no media. I'm talking movies, newspapers, television, art, music, without the permission of the government. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we look at Stalin's use of propaganda next week. And any citizens who challenge the information, challenge what's in the news, challenge what's in the movies, they're considered traitors and they might be severely punished. You can kind of think about what that might look like. Perfect connection to terror. So if you look here to the picture on the right, these are prisoners who are working at one of the first major projects in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was built a lot by the people that were living there. What a terrible line. And the people that were working there were forced into slave labor. In fact, 12,000 people died building this canal alone. If you got in trouble under Lenin or under Stalin, which we're going to talk about, you were often sent to prison camps. And in these prison camps, you would have to work this hard labor. Okay? So how would terror work? Well, it was used to crush opponents. And the leaders would have the police out to spy on citizens, to send them to work camps or to imprison them, or to use brutal force and even murder to achieve their goals. We're going to look next week at Stalin's 5-year plan, where he tried to modernize and industrialize Russia. And one of the ways he had to do that was to force people into labor. Next up, indoctrination. So indoctrination, again, is used in the schools. It's the control of education to glorify the leader, as all loyalty and support are required. And it begins with young kids, because young kids believe a lot and might be more susceptible or more likely to believe what the leaders or what the teachers are saying. So I'm going to show you a video of students in Zimbabwe. And we used to do Zimbabwe's former leader, Robert Mugabe, but we don't have time for him this year. But I did still want to include this video because we want to show you how students here are obligated, mandated, to recite the national pledge. And many people in Zimbabwe have said this is a violation of their religious freedom. The parents did not give consent to this. They believe that this national anthem is a way to brainwash their children. Okay, let's take a look at this video to see. Hopefully you can hear it.
In whose hands our future lies, I salute the nation of faith, united in our fathers and mothers who lost their lives and are brought to the interest of the richness of our natural resources. We are proud to be just in participating in our representation. So I look into the
Sorry about the internet.
Oh, let's play them for ourselves. Well done.
Okay, so students here, as you can see, they're dressed the same, they're doing the same thing. And Zimbabwe has freedom of religion, and the country supports freedom of worship. Many people complained and argued that this was violating people's religious freedoms by forcing their children to obey or follow this Pledge of Allegiance to Robert Mugabe, the leader. Anything you want to add on there? Did I miss anything? Okay. So how was religious persecution used? One of the other countries we're going to look at in this unit, besides Russia and Stalin, besides Kim Jong-un and North Korea, is the Philippines. So religious persecution. Rodrigo Duterte is the leader of the Philippines. And the country, the Philippines, is about 85% Catholic. The Catholic Church has historically held strong influence. Oh, I lost my face here. Has historically had strong influence. There, I'm back. Strong influence among the people, and they have criticized the leaders for abusing their power. Okay? So we can see here that these people are protesting Duterte because Duterte has conducted what is known as a drug war. resulting in the death of 12,000 people. And this is an older statistic, so it's potentially more people that he believes are involved in buying and selling drugs. Again, the Catholic leaders have spoken out against Duterte to stop these killings. People that speak out against him can be gunned down, killed, threatened in any way. There were 3 prominent Catholic leaders that were murdered for speaking out against Duterte's waging of this drug war. Duterte continues to criticize the Catholic Church and tries to undermine these protests. In other totalitarian societies, religious persecution looks like creating enemies of the state to blame when things go wrong. Another example we can think of is the Holocaust. That is when Nazi Germany said that Jewish people were the enemies of the state. Jewish people, gypsies, and a variety of other people. They could be any group that is said to be the common enemy can be killed on account of their religion. They might be forced to live in certain areas, follow rules that only apply to them, work on hard labor. Remember, we saw the hard labor camps in the Stalin slides, and they might be forced to stop practicing their religion. That was something that was very prominent in Russia. All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to pause the video and you're going to respond to these questions in your notebook. Please keep these responses. We're going to review them on Monday. You do not need to write down the questions. This is a chance for you to stop and pause and think about what you just heard. If your ultimate goal is to both get and keep power, what are 3 ways you can do this? Okay? Look back at those 8 methods of control and think about what are 3 ways you can do this. Of those 3 ways that you just chose in question 1, is there one way that would be the most effective in getting and then keeping power? And why? So pause the video to answer these questions. All right. After you've answered the questions, I want you to take a 2-minute stretch break. Move your arms, your legs, maybe stand up, stretch it out before restarting the video. All right. We are going to move on to the next part of class, and I'm going to turn this part over to Ms. Glickman. So we are now in the second section of the sketch notes about communism and capitalism.
All right, so we are going to explain the differences between capitalism and communism. So I want you all to take a minute and start by making a T-chart on your paper, or you can go back to the sketch note example that I created and use that for your inspiration. So your goal here is to get 3 ideas down from each side. And no worries if you can't, it's just for fun. Okay, so communism versus capitalism. So capitalism and communism are 2 very distinct economic systems, and they have a huge impact on how people and businesses and different institutions operate within a society. So one of the really main things in capitalism is that things can be privately owned. So if I made a really great invention, I could go out and start a business selling that product and make profit off of it, right? That's something that I would privately own. I could go out and invest my money in a house. I could have a place to live and that would belong to me. I could go out and do the same thing with land, right? I could go out and purchase a plot of land and that would be something that I personally own. So this also leads to businesses competing for consumers, and they can do this in 2 different ways. They can either offer lower prices or create higher quality goods. So when we have all of these different private businesses, they want to try to compete with each other to see who can make the most profit, right? Because the goal with a business is to make as much money as you can. So one way I think about this is if I go to the grocery store and I walk down the cereal aisle, I'm probably going to see like 50 different kinds of cereals. And these are all these different cereal companies competing for my money, right? They want to make as much money as they can. So some of the ways they might compete with each other is by making a cereal that tastes better. Maybe they want to make a cereal that's healthier than other brands. Or you might even see knockoff brands, right? Like Safeway sometimes has like Fruitios, which is like their cheap version of Fruit Loops. And those are the things that consumers consider when they're trying to decide what they want to buy, right? Another thing with capitalism is this idea of laissez-faire. And sometimes this is also referred to as a hands-off approach, which means the government cannot interfere with business. So again, a business is privately owned, it belongs to the person who started it or who is in charge of it, and the government cannot get involved with that. So capitalism can lead to some pretty negative consequences. And you might even see this within our own capitalist society. It can lead to stagnant social mobility, which means it's really difficult to sort of climb this social ladder. So if you grew up in poverty, it might be very difficult for you to make more money, to work your way up into the middle or higher classes. It can also lead to poor working conditions and underpaid workers. So you've probably heard of this idea of the wealth gap, right? So a lot of times in capitalism, we'll see that a majority of people work for very low wages, and then there's just a very small percentage of people who make a majority of the wealth. So think of someone like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, right? These very powerful, wealthy people. So communism is very different from capitalism. So under communism, the government owns the businesses, homes, land. You cannot privately own something. So again, if I had an invention, I could not go out and start my own business. The government would have ownership of all businesses. And when the government owns businesses or homes and land, there's no more competition, right? You don't see all these private businesses competing for profit, which means that there's less products to choose from. And so really our only option as consumers is to choose from what the government itself can provide us. One of the goals of communism is that it's supposed to lead to equal distribution of goods and no social classes. So in a way, it sort of eliminates the wealth gap that we see in capitalism. Everyone has sort of the same financial situation. Everyone's on like a level playing field. There's no lower, middle, upper class. Everybody is the same. But this can lead to a lack of incentive to work, right? If you know that you can't gain more or make more than you already have, it can be not very motivating. And it can also lead to some of these control tactics that we talked about, right? So religious persecution and media censorship. All right. So this is Karl Marx, who you may have heard of before. And Karl Marx is a very well-known theorist and thinker who believed that the capitalist system was fundamentally unfair and corrupt, and that it deprived workers and owners of their humanity. And he wrote about this in a very famous text called the Communist Manifesto. And in this, he basically argues for a communist society where there are no more social classes. And this influenced events like the Russian Revolution, which took place during World War I in the early 1900s. And it was when the Russian people rose up against their leader, and Lenin took charge, and they had like their first communist system. And it also led to many other protests, rebellions, and wars throughout history. Okay, so I'm going to show you my sketch notes for this section. And what you want to try to do here again, maybe pause and go back to the slide where I show the differences between communism and capitalism, and try to organize that in some sort of chart so it's clear for you to see. And then see if you can underline or star or maybe highlight different words or ideas that you think are really important And then I want to challenge you to try to create an icon for both communism and capitalism. So I'm going to show you my example. So again, you probably saw this chart that I made, and I copied down the bullet points, and then I went through with a highlighter and I highlighted the words that I thought were the most important. And then I came up with my own little icons. My communism one, you can't tell what it is. Kind of messed up here. That's okay, it happens. But I tried to draw like a group of people, right, to show that we're all sort of on the same level within a communist society. And then for capitalism, I drew a dollar, right? It's very, very profit driven. So again, if you need to pause, take a minute to catch up with your notes. That is totally okay. Okay, so if you are done with your notes, we're going to play a little name game. I'm going to show you a quote, and then you're going to have to write either CA for capitalism or CO for communism on your notebooks. So you're going to have to decide which system is the quote talking about. And if you and your partner are at the same point, it might be cool to think about this together. Okay, so here is our first quote. It is the abolition of the exploitation of man by Che Guevara. So I know there's some big words here. Abolition, you might have heard the word abolish, right? It means to get rid of something or do away with something. And then exploitation is essentially when somebody uses somebody else's labor or takes advantage of somebody else for their own gain. So what would be the system where we are taking away a structure where someone else can take advantage of another person for financial gain? I'll give you just a moment to answer that. Pause if you'd like. All right, and the answer was communism. So again, we know communism, everybody is equal. We are not, well, I won't say we won't exploit anybody, but it's not how we would think in a capitalist system where we have these business owners who are using laborers to make more money. That does not happen in communism. Okay, here is our next quote. This system of ours gives each and every one of us a great opportunity if we only seize it with both hands and make the most of it. And this was by Al Capone. So try to think of a system where people have opportunity, they have advantages to move up. Which one do you think this quote is referring to? Again, you can go ahead and pause real quickly. Okay, the answer was capitalism. So we know within capitalism, people have the opportunity to move up, right? Even if it is very difficult, it is a possibility. You can make more money than other people. You can get a promotion, and not everyone is going to be equal. Okay, I think this is our last quote. The political form of a society wherein the proletariat, who are workers, is victorious in overthrowing the bourgeoisie or business owners will be a democratic republic. So what do you think would be a system where workers overthrow their business owners? Okay, the answer was communism. Great work, everybody. I think I'm going to pass it back to Ms. DS now, and she will walk you through the next portion.
All righty, we're just playing musical chairs over here. And we're back. So if we think about this idea of communism and we think about how capitalism can exploit or take advantage of people who do not make as much money, and it allows for the rich to continue to get richer. And communism is this idea that the workers, the proletariat, would overthrow the bourgeoisie to have this fair and equal society. That was the vision for communism. Unfortunately, the way communism has played out in history, it doesn't ever look like that. And in fact, communism has taken hundreds of thousands of lives because it often can and does lead to a very oppressive or totalitarian society. But on a lighter note, what I would like you to do now is to open up Communism, Steve Nash, and Basketball under the Thursday, Friday classwork. This is a NPR article. You can listen to it or you can just read it. And then you want to answer the questions below in your notebook. How does the author describe Nash? How does it connect to communism? And I can't read that because the thing is covering it. Oh, are you convinced by the author's ideas? Why or why not? Enjoy. This is a fun little break. All right. On we go. Let's do another 2-minute stretch break. Move your arms, move your legs, stand before restarting this video. I just looked up cute animal stretching things. I thought these were pretty cute. All right, on we go. Last part, you guys are doing awesome. So Russia's basic facts and intro to Joseph Stalin. For this next section, put those pens down. I just want you to listen. And I wouldn't fast forward, and I know some of you are thinking to do that, but there is actually some fun facts in here I think you would like. So let me make sure that my notes are all queued up, which they are not. Okay, and now they are. Oh, I lost my face again in here. Let's pause this. Hold on, everybody. Okay, we're back. So now let's take a look at Russia. It is humongous. Look how big it is. It's there in red. Here's another way to look at it. Humongous. Massive. Russia covers 1/6 of the world's landmass. But what's interesting is that only 10% of the country is arable. The land is arable, meaning that you can farm on it because so much of it is the desert and has some pretty harsh climates. This makes food production particularly difficult. The Arctic Ocean is frozen much of the year, which makes it really hard to get in shipping, for boats to come in. Okay. Russia also has about a quarter of the world's natural resources, oil and natural gas. All right, let's keep going. What else can we learn about Russia? Let's see. Yes, this is really interesting. This is Siberia. All right. Siberia is also massive. It is, I keep having to move this, it's covering my notes. 77% of Russia is Siberia, but it is only home to about 27% of the population. Why is that? Well, the summers are very short and the winter gets down to about negative 60 degrees. Now, you all who grew up in California have no sense of how cold winter is. And that is colder than I experienced ever growing up on the East Coast. The coldest it would get on the East Coast would be like maybe 10 degrees. This is negative 60. So this area of Siberia, this area of Russia known as Siberia, was used by the Tsarist and Soviet regimes, and a Tsar is like a leader, to exile or to kick out and punish dissidents and revolutionaries. And dissident means anybody that speaks out against something. So a dissident in Russia's case would be somebody that spoke out against the leader or did something that went against the leader, and they were banished to Siberia, often to do hard labor in freezing cold weather. All right, let's keep going. Let's do some fun facts on Russia. I remember finding this a few years ago, and I couldn't find a consistent answer on this. So there's somewhere between 9 and 11 time zones. It borders 14 different countries. It has 1/4 of the world's freshest water supply. Over 85 recognized ethnic groups. There are over 100 languages spoken in Russia, but about 81% of the people speak Russian, at least Russian. They might speak multiple languages. And the main religions are Christianity and Islam, Christianity making up almost 90% of the people that live there. Okay, those are today's fun facts. Here you can see an ethnic map of the USSR, and the USSR was the name for Russia before it collapsed in the early 1990s. So you can see it's a very diverse area and quite large. All right, for the last section, we've almost made it. You're only going to take notes on the Joseph Stalin, on this part on Joseph Stalin, anything that might lead to Stalin's ability to gain or maintain control of Russia. So take a moment, look back at those 8 methods of control, and I want you to be thinking about, did Stalin use propaganda here? Did he use force here? Oh, did he use blah, 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 blah. Thinking about anything that might lead to his ability to gain or maintain control. Maybe anything you think about from his early years, you're like, this might be not a good sign. All right. So who was Joseph Stalin? Here he is as a young guy. He grew up in Georgia, not Russia. So Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but Georgia is a country near Russia. Okay. And he spoke Georgian and then he spoke Russian. He came from a pretty poor family with parents that were not particularly nice to him. The father ended up leaving and the mother raised Stalin on her own. And she was actually able to get Stalin into a religious school. It was a very good religious school. The father was a shoemaker. He lost his shop, moved away, and left the family. I'm moving this up again. Sorry. He ended up giving himself the name Stalin later in life to hide from the police. So that was sort of his own name. And Stalin means man of steel. So right away, if I'm thinking, oh, this guy named himself Man of Steel, what control tactic might that potentially connect to? All right, let's keep going. So here's Georgia. So we see Georgia is just a bit south of Russia. Okay, here we see Stalin with Lenin and Trotsky. Here's Stalin. Here's Lenin and here's Trotsky. Vladimir Lenin is somebody we're going to be talking about a little bit today and a little bit next week. He was the leader before Stalin. All right, here's Stalin as a younger man, maybe like in his early 20s. So he excelled academically and was able to go to this religious seminary. But what happened was at this religious seminary, kids made fun of him. He had scars all over his face from smallpox, which was a disease that I think no longer exists, or at least was mostly eradicated. We think so. And his left arm was slightly deformed because he had been in a carriage accident. Interestingly enough, he was studying to be a priest, and the man that went on to kill millions of people used to write poetry. But then things started to change. At this school, all non-religious books were banned. So you had to just read about religion. All students had to learn about Russian language, the Russian culture, even if you were from Georgia. Initially, Stalin was like super on board with this. He loved it. And even this school encouraged kids to snitch on each other if they were reading non-religious books. And Stalin ended up snitching on his classmates who were reading non-religious books. Side note, Stalin went on to ban religion in Russia, but that's for a later time. So while he's there, he discovers the ideas of Karl Marx, who Ms. Glickman just talked about, and Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin was also a communist leader influenced by Karl Marx. He discovered these ideas. He discovered that they had spent their time organizing workers, setting up strikes, and he became an atheist. He was no longer interested in religion. Okay? I have mixed information here. I have found that he was eventually expelled from the seminary. He was reading Darwin's Origin of the Species, all about evolution, and he started going to communist meeting groups. So he eventually was expelled. I've also found out that he dropped out. Different historical accounts. All right, so let's take a look at him here. We're going to look now at Stalin's early career. Anybody wants to take a guess as to what's happening in here? Yep, this is when he was in prison. So, in the mid-1920s, in his mid-20s, Stalin starts to devote his life to revolutionary activities. He was working at a steel plant, and he thought it was so horrible how these working conditions were. And he said, we need to revolt. We need to overthrow the bourgeoisie, overthrow these business leaders, and stage a revolution. Okay? That got him arrested, and it got him exiled to Syria. He escaped Siberia 3 times. One time he escaped dressed as a woman. Another time he escaped through the Arctic Circle. Although, interestingly enough, Siberia with its negative 60-degree winters, he claims was one of the best times of his life. He says that while he was there, he was able to shoot 12 birds and nearly died. He bragged about being able to shoot 12 birds and nearly died. I want to point out that this man was also responsible for conquering Nazi Germany and 1/5 of the world, but was very proud of shooting 12 birds. I don't know. He was able to escape relatively easily from Siberia, shocking as it is. All he needed was money, fake papers, and potentially a disguise. As he left Siberia, he developed a network of revolutionaries, and he would later make connections with Vladimir Lenin, who would go on to lead the Russian Revolution. And he would then side with a group known as the Bolsheviks, who were a form of communists. Lastly, I would like to talk about his relationship with Vladimir Lenin. Okay, let's take a look at this. So here they are. Lenin ends up getting very sick, pretty young, actually. We can see these two together here. Lenin really liked Stalin initially, so he appoints Stalin the Secretary General of the Communist Party in 1922. All right? I want you to be thinking now about what I said at the beginning of class, at the beginning of this part of the lecture. Where are we seeing Stalin's potential ability to gain and maintain control? Stalin begins to amass tremendous amount of power as the party secretary. He could hire whoever he wanted. It wasn't even that important of a post, but what he did was he made it an important post. He hired people that he knew would support him. He was able to centralize his power in a way that went unnoticed. Excuse me. And by the time that people did notice, it was too late. Even Lenin, who noticed that Stalin had taken a lot of control over the Communist Party, was too ill to take away that control. He then went on to conduct the Great Purge, where he arrested or exiled or kicked out anybody that opposed him, including his old friend, Leon Trotsky. And I know Ms. Glickman's going to talk a little bit about Leon Trotsky next week. All right. So Lenin is on his deathbed, and he is very afraid that Stalin is going to take over when he dies. So apparently, on his deathbed, he has said, I am not sure whether he, as in Stalin, will always be capable of using that authority with sufficient caution. Remember, these guys were friends. Okay? That is why I suggested the comrades think about a way of removing Stalin from this post. And again, that post was the Secretary General. He was already scaring members of his party. So Lenin supposedly said this on his deathbed. It has not really ever been confirmed. These documents, this Lenin's testament, was actually kept secret until after his death. There's also evidence that says that his wife, Lenin's wife, conducted this testament because she did not like Stalin. Ooh, history, super exciting. People throwing each other under the bus forever. All right. So Stalin would go on to lead Russia from 1924 until he died in 1953. He would then be responsible for the direct killing of 30,000 kulaks. Those were wealthy peasants. The deportation of 2 million people to Siberia. The starvation and death of 3 to 5 million Ukrainians. And that is actually something we're going to look into more detail next semester. Amounting to approximately 20 million deaths in total. This man was a totalitarian dictator through and through. But what's interesting about Stalin that we will learn again next semester is that he was instrumental or incredibly important in defeating the Nazis. We're going to finish up today with a video clip. Respond to these questions in your notebook. What was the reality under Stalin's Russia? And there are several examples. And what types of tactics did Stalin use to stay in control? Enjoy.
A plan for massive and accelerated industrialization of the Soviet Union. But for this great leap, as he called it, he needed one thing in abundance: food.
Food wasn't being supplied on the scale that they wanted it, and they couldn't therefore fund and continue with the huge industrialization program that they had. So the debate was settled in the end by Stalin, who said, okay, we're going to collectivize.
Stalin forced collectivization on the countryside, turning peasant smallholdings into massive state-controlled farms. And although party propaganda films showed life on the collective farms as some sort of paradise on earth, the reality was very different.
For the peasantry, it was a catastrophic disaster. And in the Ukraine in particular, where resistance to collectivization was at its strongest, a still untold number of millions of people died.
1 million people died in the northern Caucasus alone, some even resorting to cannibalism. Their suffering meant nothing to Stalin. He looked for scapegoats.
The ones who didn't like it were the most successful peasants, the so-called kulaks. And they were the ones who opposed collectivization because they had most to lose. So you just take the kulaks and either you kill them or you send them somewhere to the far north and let them settle there and they'll die out. And 5 million such people died purely as a result of the collectivization.
Those who weren't killed by Stalin were sent to work camps called gulags. Deliberately situated in the harshest areas of Russia, prisoners were turned into slave laborers and worked to death. Huge industrial schemes like the Dnieper Dam or the Belomor Canal became a living hell for hundreds of thousands who died during their construction.
Nobody told us anything whatsoever, no reason why we there, why they took us there, what we've done wrong, why we're there. Nobody told us anything. We just been taken as a slave,
Maria Sklugotsky was 18 years old in 1939 when she and her entire family were deported from their home in southern Poland to a labor camp in Siberia.
People were that packed, we could hardly move at all in the train. But I know a lot of people, I was scenes of people and children thrown away from the train when there was death. That's it. Nobody was buried.
After a 3-month train journey, Maria and her family arrived in Krasnoyarsk in eastern Siberia.
We had to go to work, to forest. Because they says, if you don't go to work, we don't get any food whatsoever. We've been working, cutting trees, and that in forest. I had to walk on my knees from trees to trees, because snow was very, very high. If you walk, you just fall deep in it. People die just like flies. Children, and particularly young people, nearly all died. You die, that's it.
Not that their fates would ever move Stalin. He once commented, "One death is a tragedy, 1,000,000 deaths is simply a statistic."
Okay, on that note, we're going to finish up with our final sketch notes. So I will turn this over to Ms. Pearson. Ms. Pearson, my old swim teacher. No, that's my old swim teacher. Sorry, Ms. Glickman. And she will finish this up. Sorry about that. That will definitely happen 100. Oh, I forgot to pause it. Okay, hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I did pause it. Oh, there you go.
All right, everyone, I know you're probably itching to get out of class right now, so I'm going to wrap it up real quickly for you all. So for the last part of our sketch notes, I want you to think of any idea that might lead to Stalin gaining and maintaining control over Russia. So take a minute to try to summarize some of the big ideas that we discussed today. And when you're done, try to see if you can underline, star, highlight some of the really key words or big ideas. Also, you can try to draw a person. So I'll show you what I did. One moment. Oops. Okay. So you can see in this bottom section, I sort of separated it out. So I made a list of how he gained power, and then I also made a list of how he was able to maintain it. And I highlighted some of those really big words so they would pop up off the page. And then you can see in the bottom right, I made my cute little picture of Stalin with his sort of very famous mustache and coiffed hair. I thought it was kind of silly. So yeah, that's an example that you can use. I think this is it for today's class. I hope you enjoyed it, and Ms. Diaz and I will see you next week. Bye.